Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Philip.
Hi, my name is Philip and I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me? You can all hear me? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank Joey very much for asking me to speak, and I'd like to congratulate all the birthday people, and I'd also like to welcome all the new people. I come from Scotland, which is why I sound like Groundskeeper Willie, as someone said to me. And yeah, I'd like to try and focus on the people that are new, because it stops me getting too deeply into, you know, trying to make everyone laugh and make everyone like me and make everyone fall in love with me, you know. And so I'll just try and tell you a little bit about how my life was before I drank, you know, when I drank, and since I've come here. I was born and brought up in Glasgow, which is, it's a very bad place. It's a kind of mad place, you know. I have a friend who was studying to be a doctor, and she said that when she was doing her ER stint in Glasgow, there was a German doctor came to work there, and she said to him, "What brings you to Glasgow?" And he explained that he was doing a study of medieval war wounds. And Glasgow in the 70s was one of the few places where people were still fighting with swords. I'm really not making this up. And so the first night he's on the ER, this German doctor, this guy comes in very drunk, and someone had slashed him with a sword from his shoulder to his waist. And the German guy got very excited, and he said to him, "Well, what kind of sword did he use?" And the drunk Scottish guy said, "Just an ordinary sword." And he wrote about this in the British Medical Journal, you know. So that's the place, the city I came from. There's a lot of drunk people, and they're all fucking fighting all the time, and it's raining constantly, and I mean, the people are sort of warm, you know, they'll sort of stab you and then tell you where the hospital is, you know. But anyway, and, you know, just to sort of touch on, I'd like to talk a little bit about my childhood, which may be completely irrelevant, you know. It may be that if my mother had been Mother Teresa and my father had been M. Scott Peck, the writer of The Road Less Travelled, I would still have ended up here. I don't know. But my mother was the daughter of an alcoholic. And, you know, she was a very frightened woman. She's still alive, actually. She's a frightened person, you know. And my father was also a very frightened person, you know. And he grew up in Northern Ireland. And when he was 4, you know, at that point in Ireland, actually, for a long time in Ireland, there's been a bit of trouble. There's been a bit of trouble over there for a while. And when he was 4, the British Army came to the house, and they were looking for guns, and they pulled them all out of the farmhouse. And he used to say that he never slept properly since he was 4, you know. And he lived till he was 74, so that's a long time, you know. And he was kind of traumatized with growing up there, and it was just all this sort of fire and brimstone stuff going on at home, you know. You know, a lot of they were just very frightened people. They were like children raising children, really, you know. And they really did their best. And I really believe today that I had the right father and the right mother, you know. I accept that what they gave me was what they gave me. Some of it was heroically great, you know. Some of it was fantastic. And some of it was fucking awful, you know. Some of it was fucking awful. I remember one night we had to say this rosary, which is this 10-minute prayer every night, and we got giggling. And my father went into the kitchen. He had just a crazy temper, and came out with a knife. And he said he was going to stick this knife down my throat. And I really thought he was going to kill me. And I had a younger brother and sister. And I remember thinking, if he kills me, then maybe he'll have calmed down by then. And I'll be able to protect the other two, you know. So it wasn't always the most ideal kind of situation for children, you know. You know, it was a little unstable at times, and yet it was a two-parent family. We never went without a meal. You know, it looked stable from the outside, but it was mad. And so I'm this Catholic kid, and you know, I go to school, and I'm a bright kid and a very sensitive kid in this crazy, violent, blue-collar world, you know. And I get to about 14 or 15, and I want to be a man. Now, I wanted to grow a moustache, but my hair wasn't dark enough. Other boys were getting deeper voices, you know. And I was really worried about, I just wanted to be a man. And what do men do? I wanted to be a man. I wanted to drink and maybe get laid, you know. And I was tall, so I was able to, you know, I would be the person they sent in to buy alcohol, you know. And so one of the things that guys can do, that men can do that boys can't do is drink legally, you know. In Scotland, you're meant to be 18 before you can buy alcohol. But in some places, it's more like 12, you know. And so I really wanted to try this drinking. My parents seemed to be against a lot of things that were fun, you know. Like they were very heavily against sex. And I thought, I don't think I can wait till I get married, you know. And they were very heavily against drinking as well. As I said, my mother's father was an alcoholic. There's a lot of alcoholism in the family, the extended family. And so I remember one particular night when I went out and got drunk, and it just felt like the greatest night of my life, you know. There were 3 or 4 of us, and we had a few beers in this bar, and we came out, and it was snowing. And I had this sort of epiphany, you know. I came out, and everything looked like it was covered in sugar, and I felt happy, and I felt not afraid anymore, and I felt that nothing too bad could happen. And I just loved everybody, and everybody loved me. And I just wanted to be that amount of drunk all the time from then until I died. You know, I just wanted to stay drunk. I wanted to, from 14 till, let's say, you know, I just wanted to be drunk all the time, you know. I didn't really like being sober. I couldn't cope with being sober. I just wanted to be drunk, you know. But there was a problem with this. You know, the next time I tried to recreate that evening, something went wrong, you know. And really every time I drank, trying to recapture that magical, perfect first night, you know, something would go wrong, you know. Like I would, you know, I would have a good time, but I lost one of my shoes. Or I had a good time, but, you know, I used to get terrible bruises on my shins. I think maybe I got drunk and got into some kind of shin-kicking contest with a person or persons unknown. But I would always wake up the next morning, just these huge bruises on my legs. Maybe I was walking into things, you know. Also, I couldn't hold on to money when I was drunk. Now, if I drank all the money that I had on me when I drank, I would be dead. I think I would buy pizzas. I don't know what I did with all the money, but throw them away. But or I had a good time, but I would wake up next to someone and I wouldn't know who that person was. or perhaps it would be someone who was not of the gender for which I had traditionally expressed a preference. Which it can be awkward, you know. You know, something's wrong. If you wake up somewhere and you're having to look at the person's mail, the letters, to see what their name is, you might have a problem, you know. You know, I blacked out a lot, and sometimes I had a bad feeling about what might have happened when I couldn't remember. Sometimes I thought maybe I've killed someone. I remember once thinking, I think I might have killed someone, but I'm not sure. Because I don't remember. You know, like if the police say to you, you know, like in TV shows and all, they always say, where were you on the 17th or something? I have no idea. And the other terrible dilemma of the teenage alcoholic, people would say things to me the next day like, that was some carry-on last night. You know, in a sort of judgmental sounding voice. And I would never know whether I should ask for more information or leave it at that. You know, and also, how do you tell people, I don't remember anything, tell me what happened, without communicating that you're having blackouts? It's very tricky, you know. Maybe you go to someone else who was there and see what they say, or, you know. Remember someone said to me, you know, you made a pass at my grandmother. Another time I went to someone's party, and these wine boxes had just been invented. They came to Scotland probably about, I don't know, maybe, you know, late 70s. And wine boxes came out, and I was at university, and I was in this big, you know, some university lecturer had a party, and so this wine box was there, and I thought, I'm having that fucking wine box. So I got the wine box, and I got it out the door, and I hid it in a bush for later. And then I came back in. And then later on, there's all this shrieking from the kitchen, you know. And someone said, you wouldn't believe this, someone's stolen the wine. And I you know, I said, who would do that? Honest to God, do you know all the people here? Let me help you look for it, you know. And I was feeling, I was sort of getting quite into the role of the indignant guest, you know. Feeling quite good. I was like getting really annoyed at that person, you know. And but it was just a lot of shit like that, you know. I spent a lot of time cringing. I was in a sort of semi-permanent state of cringe. You know, remembering stuff that I'd done. You know, once I was at a party, and there was a girl who had a sort of crush on, and I was a bit drunk, but not that drunk, and she went out and had a fight with her boyfriend and came home. It was New Year, and everyone was drunk, and I slipped into bed beside her thinking, you never know. And she was not very happy about this. And not only was she not very happy about it, she told anyone that she could get to listen about this, you know. And so there's lots of creepy things like that, you know. I began to feel that I was rather unlucky, you know. I began to feel that, you know, I just thought, you know, people don't seem to warm to me, you know. It doesn't seem to be very likable, you know. I felt a little cursed, you know, that, people don't seem to warm to me. I couldn't hold down a job, you know. I never had a job where they said, come back next season. They never even said, if you want a reference, you know. What they tended to say was, do you have a minute? You know, and sometimes they would say, you know, you need to finish at the end of the week. Or sometimes they just said, like, you're fucking fired, you know. I had a job as a barman once in Cornwall. I tried to get away from Scotland, so the furthest you can go in Britain, I'm sure you give a shit about the geography of the British Isles, but the furthest away you can get is Cornwall from Glasgow without crossing a large expanse of water. And so I went to Cornwall. I thought, no one knows me here. No one is Scottish. It's the Scottish people and their bad vibes. This is a fresh start here, you know. And I wanted a job carrying people's cases in this hotel because I thought, well, I'll get tips, you know. But the guy said, oh, the only job I have is a cocktail barman. He said, you can drink as much as you like as long as you don't go over the score. Now, I think I might have gone over the score. And by over the score, I mean I was stealing from the guy. I was drinking huge quantities. I was drinking Guinness and lime to try and slow my drinking down. And fighting with everyone, like, you know, arguing with everyone, trying to fuck one of the daughter of one of the guests, who was my age, but still, you know, her parents were around in the hotel. And I was also taking them to court because they were paying below the legal minimum wage. And I broke a valuable Toby jug. But they did fire me. So that was my... that was just one good example of the jobs that I did, you know. I was a law student. I was at law school, and I got kicked out after 2 years. And now to be kicked out of law school in Scotland in the 70s is like being thrown out of the Pogues for drinking, you know. It's not easily done, you know. I had I had this job as a dishwasher in a hotel. I was a kitchen porter, they call it, in Britain. And basically, there's a machine, a Hobart machine. You put plates in a sort of plastic rack, and then you open the machine, you put the plates in, and then you close the machine, and then you wait, and then you take, the machine stops, you take the plates out, and they're clean. That's it. That was my job. And mostly alcoholics did this job. It wasn't a difficult job. It wasn't a particularly demanding job. It didn't involve a huge amount of skills or education. I got a written warning about my inability to do that job. You know, my inability to get there on time. And the other sad thing about that is I lived in the hotel. You know, I woke up and I was at my work, you know. It was not like there was traffic or... So I couldn't do any job. No job was, you know, easy jobs I couldn't do. Couldn't do relationships, couldn't talk about my feelings. You know, I once got drunk. I was going to say that I was going out with this girl, but I was obsessed with this girl and she was fucking other people and I would follow her. That's not really a girlfriend in the traditionally accepted sense. And I said to her, we need to talk. She's like, who are you? And, oh, God. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. And I said, but I can't talk unless I'm drunk, you know. And the problem with it talking when drunk is that, you know, the bus would go past that stop where I was lucid, you know. I would be like, not drunk enough, oops, too drunk. You know, crazy, angry, violent, breaking stuff, all that, you know. I got into a lot of dangerous situations, you know. One summer, I was working in the south of France, selling Taiwanese oil paintings on a nudist beach. And I was living in a tent, this very, very cheap tent, sort of two-man tent in the south of France. And it was like a sort of tandoori clay oven, you know. I would be drunk every night and the sun would just bake you in this tent, you know. And I had a paraffin lamp in the tent. And I must have knocked it over in my sleep, you know. And the first thing I did when I woke up was I would light a joint or a cigarette if I didn't have a joint, you know. And I remember waking up one morning and there was this weird smell. And I'd soaked myself in paraffin, drunk the night before. And I would have gone up like Mrs. Gandhi at her funeral, you know. You know, had it not been for the fact that it sort of came to me that I was covered in paraffin, you know. So this was just my life. I was just stumbling on through all of this, you know. And so So I'll try and flash forward to getting into Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a friend called Jim, and Jim was a little older than me, and he was at university with me, and he drank, and he took drugs, and on and on and on. There's a whole group of us, you know. And I went back after the summer, and someone said, "Did you hear about Jim?" And I said, "No." He said, "He went to that AA." And it was said with a tone that I would now associate with, "He has a colostomy bag." Do you know what I mean? It's like, we're going to touch on this, but we're not going to dwell on this. Because it's rather distasteful and perhaps slightly unmanly, you know? So Jim went to AA, and I knew Jim, and I used to see him in the Students' Union, and I would have a coffee with him, and I would feel sorry for him. I thought, God, that guy, he can never drink. Oh, can you imagine? And I would, you know, get him to buy me a coffee, basically. And I ended up becoming friendly with him, you know. And we worked one summer in Switzerland picking tomatoes. And it was just me and Jim and a bunch of Portuguese people, you know. So Jim's in AA, and he's telling me all about AA and Bill W. and Dr. Bob and the compulsion and all that. And he's smoking weed like a fucking fiend all the time. It's not exactly Dr. Bob and Bill, you know, at the guy's table in the poster, you know. But, so he's telling me all about addiction and all this stuff. And I said to him, okay, yeah. And I said, so what about the weed? You seem to smoke a lot of fucking weed, you know? And I'm smoking the weed too, you know? But I said, how is that okay? How does that fit in with the drinking? And he said, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, God. So I thought, well, fair enough. I don't want to talk about it either then. And I could maybe, I stopped drinking for a little while with him for a few weeks, you know. I thought, well, maybe it'll help him, and, you know. I stopped for a bit, and what I noticed when I stopped drinking was that I had all these different feelings, you know, like, go through all these different feelings in one day. It was very strange. And, but I was 19, and I just thought, I had this idea of AA, and it was in black and white for some reason, and it was a lot of big, burly Cockney guys with shaved heads singing hymns about Jesus. Now, I don't know where I got all that from, but that was what I thought AA was. I thought, I'm not fucking doing that, you know. And I just went on drinking, you know, and so the last few months of my drinking, I was living in Madrid. I was teaching English as a foreign language to some Spanish people. And I'm hoping they're all in Spanish Al-Anon, El Al-Anon or whatever it is, you know. But, and I was in a bad way by then, you know. I hadn't slept for about 2 years. And I had a hacking cough from asthma and bronchitis. You know, I was plagued by auditory hallucinations. I was acutely paranoid all the time. You know, I would triple lock the door when the guy and my roommate took the trash out, you know. And if you stopped the movie and said to me, well, why are you triple locking the door? I would have said, well, you can't be too careful. You know, I didn't know who was after me, but I knew someone was after me. I knew I was in trouble. I knew they were coming. They were out there. And I really started to seriously contemplate suicide, you know. And I was 22 at that point, you know. And I was in Spain, you know. You could get a bottle of wine for 20 cents if you supplied the bottle, you know. You could get weed anywhere. Prostitution had just been made legal, you know. It was a fun place, but not for me, you know. Not for me at that point. You know, I was mostly sitting at home watching movies dubbed into Spanish, you know, like Lassie Come Home in Spanish, and crying, you know, drinking wine and crying when Lassie got Timmy out of the fucking well or whatever, you know. With these same three guys doing all the voices, you know. And, singing along with the shampoo commercial. And I could sing, if you like, I could sing you some of the commercials now, And so my life had become very narrow. I wasn't going out, I wasn't causing trouble, I wasn't chasing women. I was just sitting there, getting drunk and feeling frightened and breaking things and cleaning them up and hearing people in the apartment that weren't there and having lots of nightmares, a lot of nightmares about funerals and my funeral. And I remember there was cats. I think I was being buried. There were cats at my funeral. It was all just really crazy, And I was just going really mad, So I went to Glasgow for the Christmas of 1982. I went home to Glasgow to visit my family. And by visit, I mean throw my bag in the door and get the fuck out of there because of the terrible bad vibes, And went drinking with my real friends and got drunk. And we ended up in this the studio flat, this one-bedroom apartment. And there was a woman on my left-hand side in this bed, and she was a lesbian. She'd been a lesbian for some time, and I made a pass at her. I thought maybe she could maybe she had given up the lesbianism. Maybe she would have lapsed from being a lesbian. And she said, "No, I'm still a lesbian. Stop this." And then there was a woman on the other side of me who I had slept with once before, in my defence, and I had a crack at her as well. And she said to me, "Stop that. No." and there was something about the humiliation of, not only was I turned down by two different people, but it was sort of semi-public because there was other people in the room, and they could each hear each other, and it wasn't even about having sex. I was just so desperately lonely, So anyway, I woke up the next day and I had no money and I had one cigarette which was broken. I'd lain on it, and no papers to fix the cigarette, which is always a bad thing, and no money to even get home. And people will pay you to leave if you're annoying enough, People will give a small subsidy to an alcoholic to leave, And I said to someone, I don't know, I have no money. And people would go. And so I went to the pub, the way you do with the extra, And I had half a pint of beer and some wine. And I was there on my own, which was not that unusual, And then I don't know why then, and why not earlier, and why not later, but that day I went to this payphone. This is before cell phones, before the core of the earth had cooled, when dinosaurs roamed the planet, and I put them up 10p in the payphone, and I called up this guy who was an AA, who'd stopped smoking weed as well, astonishingly, and I said to him. And I didn't even know if I was going to say it. I said, "I think I might have a bit of a drink problem." He said, "Okay, why don't you come over?" And he didn't say, "If you join now, you can get this attractive sports bag and headband for free." He didn't say, "Stay right where you are, I'll come over in a fast car." He didn't say, "Do you have MasterCard or Visa?" He just said, "Come over," And I had no money, and I thought I would have to go back to Spain to this job because it was the only job I had. And so I went over to his house, and I said to him, "I'm doing some stuff I don't really understand." I told him about one night when I got drunk and smashed up this bar. And he was filling in the gaps in what I was telling him. He said to me, "Well, when you were smashing up the bar, were you thinking, I'll show them?" And I said to him, "That's exactly what I was thinking." I was thinking, how did he know that, And I actually thought, maybe this guy's psychic, Because I didn't know alcoholics thought in similar ways. And up until that point, I just thought it was just me, and I was the only person like this. And I really honestly felt that if I went to a doctor and said, "This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking," that he would have a button. There would be a button, a hidden button under the table, a little white button. And he would press the button and all the doors would lock. And guys would come running from a hospital, with these weird kind of uniforms that button there, and a big net. and take me to a psychiatric institution, and I would never get out again, you know. That's what I thought was going to happen. So he spoke to me that night, and then he said, you can stay here tonight. I slept on his floor, and the next day he took me to a meeting. I went back to this meeting actually a couple of months ago. It was Tuesday lunchtime meeting, you know. And I went in and I thought, well, what is this AA thing, you know? I had to go through all these different doors in this Church of Scotland place, you know. And there's all these wee men, tiny wee men. You know, I'm like a god in Scotland because I'm above 5 foot tall, you know. And they're all wearing those raincoats you can fold up into a little package, you know. And they all had false teeth. And there was one of them who had a very red face. And, you know, I looked around, I thought, this must be what alcoholics look like, you know. And this guy told his story. And his name was Alec, and he had a hearing aid, and he was 4 years sober, and he'd been a pimp in Scotland. We have pimps in Scotland, you know. Oh, yeah. And he talked about drinking and trying to get his pimping gig together, and it all fell apart, you know. And he ended up in this psychiatric hospital. He was strapped down onto the bed, he said. And he said he came to, and this male nurse was urinating on him. Now, some people like that kind of thing, but not me. This male nurse was pissing on him and saying to him, you kept me awake all last night with your drinking. And that kind of got my attention, you know. So I thought to myself, if I keep drinking, I'm going to end up tied down there. I don't want to find out if that guy's still working there, you know. And yeah. So I've got 5 minutes now to talk about my 28 years of sobriety. So I haven't had a drink since my first point of contact with Alcoholics Anonymous. And that doesn't make me better than Dr. Bob, who drank again. You know? It doesn't mean I'm smarter than him or more spiritual than him. You know, I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. You know, I fight with my wife. I have struggles with intimacy. I get very resentful at my job. You know, I'm just like an ordinary person. I don't have healing powers. I can't run across water. I don't, you know, piss perfume. I'm just an ordinary person, you know. And but what has happened is I haven't had to drink so far. So far, I haven't had to drink, and because I've done what was asked of me, you know. I went to a ton of meetings. I got a commitment. I got a sponsor. I joined a group. That is the commitment. That's that twice. And I just did what was suggested, you know. And sometimes I thought, this is just, I'm sick of this, you know. You know, I'm coming to places I don't want to go to listen to people I don't even like, saying things I've already heard. How is that helping? You tell me, how does that help anyone, you know? And I just kept on coming, and I've had ups and downs, and you know, I've just had the full colour chart of experiences. You know, I've had good things happen, I've had bad things happen. You know, I lost my father in sobriety, I lost my older brother to cancer. You know, I've got 3 children, we had 2 miscarriages along the way. You know, I had 2 periods of quite serious ill health myself. You know, so it's not been like life doing what I wanted to. You know, I kind of secretly hoped that I would come here and nothing too bad could ever happen to me, and everything would kind of go the way I wanted it to because I was not drinking. You know, like like a sort of Bernie Madoff fund that would just perform better or well every year. You know, whereas the truth of the matter for me has been, it's been more like the stock market, you know. Sometimes it's going up and sometimes it's going down, and, you know. So if I can do this, you can do this. It's not rocket science. It's not witchcraft. It's sort. I think of it as like a sort of recipe. Like the steps are a recipe, you know? And if you follow the recipe, if you do what I did, then you'll get what I've got. It's really that simple. It's like spiritual technology, you know? And if you can find a way to connect with the divine, you won't have to drink, and your life will improve. You will improve, your life will improve. You will be okay if you're new and you're thinking, am I going to be okay? If you give this your best shot, you are going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's all going to sort itself out. If you don't drink, you don't pick up, and you give it your best shot, it'll all fall into place. I have been frequently fucking astonished at the number of my problems that have just withered away while I focused on not drinking, sponsoring people, putting chairs away, just doing all that stuff, you know. You know, there's a weird sort of alchemy to this, you know, that if I take care of the spiritual stuff, most of the other stuff fixes itself. But the terrible corollary of that is if I don't take care of the spiritual stuff and I start thinking about when am I going to be famous, why can't I get more money, why don't I have a better job, why isn't everyone be nicer to me, then it tends to all go really shitty really fast, you know. But if I can do this, you can do this, you know. And what I was told was you need never drink again. I mean, I'd like to emphasize that point. If you're just back after 4,000 slips and 29 rehabs, you need never drink again. And if it's your very first meeting, you need never drink again, you know. I really, really, really believe that. You need never drink again. That is the message. If you give this your all, and you can be honest with yourself, you know. But I'm very, very grateful to be asked to speak. I really am. It really helps me. I don't know about anyone else, but it really does help me. And I'm going to leave you 30 seconds to yourselves. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First, I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.